Hello, this is Nathan, better known as CrazyhermitDM, and this is my podcast, The Hermit's Homebrew. Joining me today is Brent from Lang Mini Studios, and Chase, better known as Kilk, as we talk about Dungeons & Dragons and tabletop gaming. So welcome back, everybody. We're here talking about our D&D, or fantasy has always been a space for escapism, and that's one of the things I want to talk about this episode for sure. With tabletop gaming even more, whether it's a pre-written setting or one of our homebrew settings, whether you have heroes or anti-heroes or villains, depending upon the game you're playing, or go battling against dragons to save kingdoms, or in the case of this podcast, our current homebrew, it's saving reality itself from the aberrations that are trying to terraform the reality to their own will. This conversation, it's going to get a little spicy, I think, this episode. It's been brewing for a long time. We've dipped our toe in the water, and just more recently, within the last week, it kind of reared its head again. We try and stay out of it on this podcast and just give advice or talk about our stuff. But when I saw Sly Flourish's his anti-colonialism page, and then not only that, but the culture war that's kind of going outside of our hobby that we try and stay out of, has bled obviously into our hobby and has for a while. We just choose to kind of do our own thing.
Well, it's kind of one of those things to where art imitates life imitates art, and it goes back and forth. So it was only really a matter of time.
But it made an article in the New York Times, a mainstream thing, or mainstream media, talking about how these geeks are fighting among each other. What's going on here?
Yeah. Why are the nerds fighting? Yeah.
So the thing that made me want to chime in and kind of drag you guys along with is, instead of staying silent this time, as I was mentioning, there's a section of this new book by Sly Flourish called The Forge of Foes, which is a monster manual style book created by him and probably some freelancers. I'm not sure if the anti-colonialism thing or the monster romance section was particularly written by him.
I'm sorry, monster romance?
Yeah, there's a monster romance page talking about how to romance monsters and ask for consent and how to do it properly.
Are we talking like orcs, or are we talking like...
In general, yeah.
Or are we talking like the really weird stuff?
Probably the really weird stuff as well. I'll have to send it to you here.
Because I know in the tail end of the 3.5 glory days, they had a really controversial book come out. And I forget what it was called. Oh my God, I forgot what it was.
Well, I know we made fun of it with our setting with the blue magic.
Yeah, but it was like the book of erotic fantasy or something like that. And there was a page in that book that had a chart, like a cross-sectional chart, that showed what species could produce offspring with another species.
That actually leads me into another subject that recently came up. Is I did not realize towards the beginning of last year, Wizards of the Coast brought up about not bringing any more half races in.
Yes, that's why. Yeah, you won't see half orcs, you won't see half elves. They're not in the. They're not playable species. Yeah.
Which.
In the new versions, really, I didn't see that. That's interesting.
There's no half. Yeah, the halves are gone. Halflings are still there, but well, if half elves are gone,
that's more about their size, right?
Well, and that's a whole other argument of, do halflings need to exist in the same realm as gnomes and vice versa? They both fill the same role, essentially.
I mean, in our setting, they are one and the same because there is a story reason why, and I just felt it was easier to combine the race. And also, in our setting, using the term halfling towards a halfling or a gnome is a slur.
Yeah,
because they are, in quotations, they are not half anything. They are. But this, as I mentioned, this includes a segment about anti-colonialism and TTRPGs, which is essentially questions the way 99% of our real world history has been shaped.
Yeah.
At the same time, it encourages players to explore kind of more inclusive storytelling, and I want to hit on that, especially this episode. Something, still, all three of us and the podcast fully support is being inclusive and making it a welcoming table and just having fun. We've preached that over at least 20 out of the 60 episodes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And implied it more than that. Mm-hmm. But there are some good points brought up in this book, I will admit, and I do agree with some of it. And I'm not putting down the subject at hand, but is this really even a thing that needs to be addressed?
I don't think so, honestly. I mean, we talk about running D&D your own way all the time, and it's much easier in a fantasy setting to say, oh, these orcs did this horribly bad thing, than it is to say these humans did this horribly bad thing, right? It gives people kind of an out, I think, in that sense, to have evil-aligned races that do more evil things. Even have, like, fantastical origins, right, that are good or bad. So, it's just talking about D&D and doing it your way. There's no... If you don't want your orcs to be crazy rampaging monsters and doing all the crazy evil stuff that a lot of them do, and you want them to be more intelligent, then do it in yours. That's fine.
And I think Chase just... I think you just jumped to the end of the conversation there, because I think that's what, like, the three of us generally feel, is if you don't want it in your game, don't put it in there. If you want it in your game, put it in there. It does,
nobody plays the rules as written.
Yeah, exactly.
The other thought I had in mind is just, did he just put this in his book to cause controversy to sell PDFs?
And that's what makes me mad. Is I agree with what he's like, some of the stuff that he said, like that we've seen, because obviously I haven't bought the book.
Not for $77.
Yeah, I was just on Amazon, Chase, while you were talking, and Lazy DM's Forge of Foes, tools and guides to build, customize, and run fantastic monsters in your 5th edition fantasy games. Buy it now, paperback, from $77.47 and up. Like, yeah. Who is selling this for $77?
He is.
128 page book overview, 128 pages, hardcover book. I don't know how
you can make it cost more than the D&D.
Yeah, the D&D book was like the new player's handbook. I think was cheaper than that.
How many pages is it?
128.
That's not even that beefy.
That's like a third of the size of
like stuff, right? If it's a market for them to sell it at that price point, then it is what it is. I just don't think it's that big of a deal. Like, that's the purpose of finding the right table, finding the right group, finding.
You're right.
Play the game you want to play.
I think what's making it so controversial is the wording. Is he's not saying, you don't need to have your orcs be all evil. You don't have to have your gnolls be all evil. You don't have to have your elves be all sunshine and rainbows. He's inserting blatantly aggressive verbiage. How to be anti-colonial. It's not like he's being, hey, be more inclusive.
He's using buzzwords and stuff to try to stimulate talking points, and it's successful, right? We're sitting here talking about it, and so is a lot of people.
Yeah, we're sitting here talking about it, yeah.
It's just frustrating, because the other thing that's driving me nuts, and this is the whole reason why I even wanted to make an episode, is, and I've mentioned it on the podcast before, is obviously he wrote this, and there is, at the top of the page, it does, this is optional, this is just recommendations and all that. Mm-hmm. Good on him.
Yeah.
But you have people, obviously, that are so polarized in this culture war that want to bleed it into our community, and they come out and they say, if you're not doing this, you're playing the game wrong. And I'm sorry, that's wrong, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of people that say, oh, there's no wrong way to have fun. There's no wrong way to play the game. There's no wrong way, well, I've been doing some thinking, and I actually don't agree with that anymore. I do believe that there is a wrong way to play this game. And it's when either the DM or the players are blatantly and intentionally making people uncomfortable or forcing certain viewpoints or forcing certain ideologies, forcing whatever on their players to the point that the players or the DM are becoming uncomfortable and are starting to think about not playing anymore.
Like,
You're doing it wrong.
In
Sorry.
general, at that. Because
Yeah.
how many, like, there's the RPG horror stories thread on Reddit. And how many stories of those of where the DM or one of the other players get super oppressive and it just like, I don't want to play even this game anymore.
Yeah. If you're making people not want to play the game and you're making people uncomfortable sitting at the table with you, you're playing the game wrong.
And it's just 99% of it can be boiled down to communication with your group on a session 0.
Yeah.
Or discontinued. It drives me nuts, and that's what really grinds my gears.
He said it.
It grinds my gears. When it's just you're playing it wrong. Those people that come around and tell me I'm playing my home game, that all my players are okay with the way we're playing and we all have fun, we're doing it the wrong way.
Yeah.
We're playing our game of make-believe wrong.
Yeah, as much as people want to like make fun of people who played D&D, it's like, oh, you're just sitting around with a bunch of pens and pencils and you're playing make believe, and it's like, yeah, we are, who cares? Now it's we're playing make believe wrong. Wait, no, I can still remember back in okay, let me get my walker and my my come along air tank here so I can be the old man. But I remember back when playing D&D was bad. Like, society looked down on you for doing it. Now it's mainstream to the point of the news cares about the D&D community.
Back when I first started playing in 2009, like, we didn't even in public say that we played D&D. We didn't admit it.
No.
We, me and my best friend at the time, and I've told this story to you, whenever we'd text over Facebook, because for whatever reason we didn't do direct messages, we wrote on each other's walls.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. It was, hey, you okay to do Fight Club this Saturday?
Yeah.
To the point to where one of the D&D guys that we would go to comic shops and I'd run games for, he like, you guys do a Fight Club and question mark? I'm like, no, that's our code. And then down the comments, like, no, that's our code for D&D.
Yeah, that's code. We did. We said, it was a fantasy league.
Yeah.
It's like, oh yeah, this weekend we're getting together at the fantasy league, and we very quickly had to stop that. Because people are like, oh, you do fantasy football? Oh, here's my league here. And you're like, hey, do you have space in your league? Like, whoa. Okay, we got. There's a flaw in the system there.
I do gotta agree that fantasy football is D&D for jocks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or for sports nuts at least.
Yeah,
because I did it for a couple years myself. I think everybody did.
So, but yeah, going to this, what makes me mad, and here's my rant, I guess, is when people that are the people that think this needs to be addressed are overgeneralizing, I guess. In my life, I have been accused quite recently of being too specific. That when someone will ask me a question, and I will have difficulty answering that question because I feel it's too broad of a question. And so I'll ask for specifics, and they get irritated with me because I'm overthinking it. I'm like, well, no, I mean, I'm not going to go into like specific situations, but this is kind of one of those things to where this is the other side of the spectrum. Like, if people were to say that orcs represent a real life race of people, I call bullshit, because we don't have green-skinned, tusked people walking around at Home Depot or wherever. They don't exist. If there was ever a species in D&D to represent people from a certain heritage, It already exists. It's called human.
Mm-hmm.
Don't reach. The elves aren't French. The dwarves aren't Scottish. Take your pick. That's not real. I like the joke that art styles, elves are Art Nouveau and dwarves are Art Deco. I'm like, okay, that makes sense to me. Like, I think it's funny, but it's a joke. It's not a cultural representation or a cultural pigeonhole to put these races in, because it's a joke. It's not real. Stop trying to put real world situations on fantasy races. In Lord of the Rings, you have Legolas running around and you've got, Gimli running around. They are vastly different than the elves and the dwarves from the original Hobbit animated movie. The elves, that Legolas's father looks like he's a goblin in the original animated Hobbit movie. The wood elves are little goblins.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now we've got Orlando Bloom running around. Okay, okay. But no one lost their minds. No one burned down Hollywood because, not my elves. Like, who cares? It's fantasy.
Right. I don't know the origins of how they created the races, like when D&D was being formed, or what they were based off of. But like, to me, like you said, you look at them and there's humans, there's elves, there's fae, there's satyrs, there's constructs. Like, it's just, you can make people do anything in your world. Anything.
Back when it was chainmail.
And if the people at your table don't like it, then
that's a conversation to have, and you can change it. Yeah.
With your table, right? It's no different than like our table doesn't do PvP, right?
Yeah, for the most part, yeah.
So
I don't think we've ever even had that discussion because it's never happened.
Colfax hit Toy Bar.
Oh, yeah, true. Okay.
And stole from him. Yeah.
And stole from me, which I didn't personally care. Like, I don't have that personal affliction to the PvP scenario, but I understand, because it's hard to say that your characters are physically attacking each other.
Yeah,
but
you're supposed to be friends.
You're supposed to keep group unity and go save the universe, right?
Yeah, exactly.
In reality, we're all playing superheroes, so
Captain America Winter Soldier versus Iron Man, that was awesome. That was an amazing
was really
fight. Holy cow!
I've been getting a lot of traction recently online to that scene. I've seen it a few times recently.
And you hit on it a little bit earlier. I think it was Brent that mentioned it. If you don't have like a player or even a dungeon master, I should say, that's not trying to put a message out with their storytelling or make some sort of political agenda out of a fantasy story, talking mostly looking at you, Star Wars, Disney, that it's going to really just detract from the story itself, then if there's that level of trust, more than anything, there should be no problems. And this episode should be a mute point to your game. But for whatever reason, if for some reason you have a player that doesn't want colonialism, then sit down and talk to them and talk to them. Just don't get adversarial with them or tell them that they're stupid or put them down, or vice versa with your dungeon master. Don't tell them they're stupid, or more recently with Twitter calling an older player a grognard, or their opinion don't matter because of which also got underneath my skin a bit, because some of the thoughts that are brought up in this do lead to more critical thinking. And it did make me think a little bit of, okay, because we draw on our inspiration, of real world comparisons, usually for our D&D, especially ours with the Nordic setting and such. it made me think, okay, what would a world look like that, like, is it too naive or idealistic on that part to think of a world where no one's colonized on each other, everyone lives in their original lands,
Yeah, everyone stays in their stays in their lane.
never been a war, or if there has been, we give back our territory to each other. I just
And that's kind of, if you want to look at like a real world situation, there is now I'm you said I could do this, so I'm gonna do it.
okay.
There is no innocent culture, in my opinion.
No.
No culture is immune to quote unquote colonialism or expansionists or anything like that. Because even if you go back to pre-recorded history, if we believe, science and all of that, we all came from one area. Okay, well, if we all came from one area, then why the hell are we all over the world now? Well, it's because we expanded. That's what animals do, and human beings are animals. So we spread out from that cradle of civilization, whether it be in Russia or Africa or whatever scientific theory you adhere to, and we spread out to where from Africa to
At least Homo sapiens.
yeah, from Africa to Russia, across the Bering Strait, into Alaska and Canada and down. Like, wouldn't that be colonialism? Wouldn't that be expansionist? If we all came from the same place, then we all need to go back to that same place, but we can't. There's 8 billion people on this planet. Or almost 8 billion. I'm not 100% sure on the exact number. But you get my point. We can't do that. Though the world can't support that massive shift of population. But what we can do is at least look at each other and go, hey, you're cool. You haven't done anything to hurt me.
No.
So I'm going to leave you alone. You're going to leave me alone. And we're going to go about our lives because we've got enough shit to deal with that we don't have to make up stuff. Now, I'm not saying that we should overlook history. We should learn history. We need to examine it, we need to look at it, and we need to learn from it. And we learn from history so we don't make the same mistakes in the past. And yes, a lot of very, very bad things happened in history. Humanity is not a good species. We are violent, we are reactionary, we are greedy. But we don't have to be. And when that can start now. Don't inject your own viewpoints where it doesn't need to be. I'm rolling dice, I'm writing on a piece of paper, I'm playing with my friends, but when I'm not making the orcs Hispanic.
No.
Wizards of the Coast did that. And if you're saying I'm wrong, okay, cool, that's fine. But I challenge you to look at the new player's handbook and look at the picture that the official artwork of the orcs. And
They look Hispanic.
yeah, and I'm not saying that they're still green and they still have tusks and everything, but Wizards of the Coast went out of their way to give them either Mexican or Spanish, some sort of Hispanic heritage in their clothing and stuff like that. And I'm not saying that's bad, because I don't care. And it's kind of one of the, it's kind of a reach. But once someone pointed it out, I kind of look at it and I go, okay, yeah, I can kind of see that. I can see where they're coming from. I don't know if that was their point, if that's what they wanted to do. If they wanted to have different species in the new books to be representative of real world races. I don't know. I hope not. I hope not, because
if I think about orcs,
yeah,
right. Like if I think about orcs, and I think about let's take other orcs from other settings as well. We'll take the Warhammer orcs.
orcs with a K.
Even in fantasy, like they generally come from arid regions, right?
Yeah.
So I would hope that that's more of what they were doing, like, oh, these Central America regions are more arid regions, they're going for that. Now, if it was blatantly just, hey, we're going to make these people Hispanic and this is going to be the culture, that's weird.
That
right?
Yeah, that's pretty tone deaf in my opinion. Yeah.
But we are also talking about a company who's done a lot of really terrible stuff, so their goodwill that they have with their fan base is pretty low.
That is true. Yeah.
So we have to understand that there's not a lot of goodwill when it comes to Wizards of the Coast right now, or Hasbro.
Yeah.
When it comes to the D&D IP in general, with all the things that they've tried to pull. So anything that they do at this point, whether it has good or bad intentions, is always going to be looked at in a negative light for him. And, it's deservedly so, in my opinion.
Yeah, they've definitely earned the
Animosity?
side eye that they're getting right now.
Animosity is the word I'm thinking.
That's a good word. Yeah, they've earned it.
And then back, the point I had with Sly Flourish earlier is, are they just not trying themselves to create this controversy to sell more books or get more attention? Because in the words of Gene Simmons from Kiss, there is no bad press.
That is true. I think I brought this up with you earlier when we first started talking about this episode. Is I'm a big fan of the pendulum effect. I say it's real, and by the pendulum effect, I mean for people who are our younger audience who may not know what a pendulum is. Look at any old movie with a clock, and there is a big long bar with a weight at the bottom is going back and forth, tick tock, back and forth, back and forth. Well, it's been used in psychology and sociology and all of that to show extremes. You have the pendulum swing one way and it goes all the way to the left. And I'm not saying politically or anything, I'm just a general direction. It swings, let's say it swings to the left and it goes all the way, and then it gets to that extreme. Then it stops, it sits there for a split second, and then it starts swinging back. And then it goes to the middle, and then it swings all the way to the right. Again, not talking about politics. It goes all the way to the right. And then it sits there for a second and swings back. What I'm thinking is that Sly did this anti-colonial message to be one of those extremes. Either to the left or to the right, doesn't matter. But it's one of those far extremes of that pendulum, because there's also other people that are making arguments that are the exact opposite, that are the other extreme. So hopefully, again, this may be naive of me. I don't know. I don't know Sly. I've never talked to them. I don't know. But what I'm thinking is that this is extreme, so that the other people who are just as extreme in the other direction can get the pendulum to go back to the middle, into that nice middle area to where the most people are happy, not to one
where
extreme
most of the crowd
other.
is.
Or to where, I agree, to where a vast majority of the crowd does sit. It's maybe 5% one way, 5% the other. The other 90 are probably just like, are we really talking about this? Is this really a thing?
Wait.
It never came up in my game.
See a lot of the horror stories on Reddit, right? That's really what a lot of these things come from. I feel like is we see a lot of the D&D horror stories on Reddit, and that some of those stories pick up.
I've seen a lot of horror stories. Like one of my favorite ones is on YouTube is Crit Crab. He tells a lot of D&D horror stories and tabletop gaming horror stories. There's been a couple of times where I've heard him tell a story that he either got from Reddit or like Instagram or wherever, to where he's told the story, and I'm sitting there and I'm kind of going, I'm gonna take things that didn't happen for 200, Alex. To where there's been a couple of times where even he's like, okay, if this really happened, this is bullshit.
There's a lot of threads like that on
and to
Reddit.
where now,
a lot of them are just fake.
Yeah, and however, that's also bad. That's bad for the community, because then it starts to skew your point of view for all of the posts. Now, if someone goes on Reddit and they post a true horror story, I hope they get legit answers and not just the sarcasm or this.
There's usually a good amount of dudes who are like fake post, fake post, fake post.
Yeah,
and then
exactly.
there's other people who are like, well, if it's real, here's what we're talking about. And so I think to your point, there are people who go both sides of that and do give advice just in the off chance that this wildly ridiculous story is true.
Even if it's just hyped up for popularity, traction, the Hollywood razzle dazzle, even if there is a kernel of truth in these stories, then okay, yeah, there needs to be a discussion about, okay, if something like this were to happen, here's what we suggest, and I'm cool with that. But come on, guys, I read some stuff on there that I went, there's no way you put up with that for that long, and that this person did this for that long, and everyone just went along with it. No, I'm sorry.
I mean, we have our own horror story that we put up with, but some of the examples that they put up with, in quotations, if it were real, then yes.
You got a point.
Because, like, me and Brent put up with our fair share of toxic behavior in our previous campaign before you came along, Chase, before we broke up, and then I got together with you, Chase, and then we brought back in.
Yeah, we made it a threesome.
Right. Hey, let's go.
Hey, you're the one talking about breaking up and getting together.
Oh, yeah, giggity giggity.
Exactly.
The next level thought I had about this, because I spent a solid couple of days thinking about this, because it upset me at first, and I really thought about it. The one thing that I like the fact that it is throwing out traditional norms and gets you to rethink things. That I like.
Yeah. What they talk about, the Knoll example.
Yeah.
About how there's an example about, don't say the Knolls are attacking, because that implies that they're doing it just because they're Knolls. No, say the Knoll bandits are attacking. And that implies that they are bandits that happen to be Knolls. And I'm okay with that.
I actually liked that idea.
I don't know if I'm going to do, I think I said the mental marathon to change my wording in every situation I describe.
No.
But there, I get the point. That's a good point.
I mean, I can see it, right? But we're also talking about intent, right?
Very
it's
true.
all intent in the end.
Yeah, it's about, what do you mean by it? Yeah.
I mean, some people just put their foot in their mouths. I'm not going to list the example why on air, but I've done it before without realizing it. And I can vouch that some people just put their foots in their mouths without realizing.
Yeah, the anniversary of that's coming up, isn't it?
It is. Here in a month or two. And I'll still hand out I'll still hand out inspiration that day.
Yeah, and we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't see any real problem with it. If you want to use all Knolls and you want to make all your Knolls just like ravaging barbarian tribes, like who cares?
Well,
I just don't understand the reasoning why that matters.
My argument would be
if you don't want to do that, then don't do that.
True.
Yeah, my argument to that is the same one that obviously probably brewed this up a bit. Was like they talked about how orcs are were traditionally shown as high strength, low intelligence. That it's like, why, if you don't like that,
Yeah, they're perfect barbarians.
they're perfect
They're amazing
barbarian.
barbarians. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Right, the different class specifics that made them, thematically certain ways, and that was fine.
Yeah.
It let you choose from things.
Which is why the orc wizard is such like a mind bender. Because what are you doing playing an orc wizard? Orcs get a minus, back in 3.5, orcs actually got a penalty to intelligence, to where the maximum that you could have unmodified was an 18. If you were an elf, you can get to 20. If you're an orc, you were capped at 16. And so being an intelligence-based class was actually really bad for an orc. So that's where a lot of the fun came from, is when you got those weird combinations and and working around it and adopting it into your character. Because there was one I remember that there was an orc wizard, but they did a really good job of like the orc going above and beyond just to be equal. Like let's say you had an elven wizard, it came naturally to them because they had a natural affinity to magic, and they got a bonus to intelligence.
But right, because in those worlds, there are background reasons why elves are more magical. There are background reasons why dwarves are, smaller and more stout, right?
Yeah.
These are all just dynamics. They're not meant to be any way, shape, or form anything other than a creative tool.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, use it as a creative tool because the player of that orc really role played like the orc working hard, like staying up late at night studying their spell book, because sometimes these complex arcane symbology, was difficult for them. It brings really good role playing.
Meanwhile, Warhammer's out there with Gork and Mork exist just because the orcs believe they exist.
It brings up 2 points in my mind where, like, I'm reminded of this sports interview, and unfortunately I cannot remember the athlete's name, but he was talking about him versus another athlete, and he goes, listen, this guy is just naturally talented, and he just is there. I've worked hard to get where I'm at. I am was not naturally gifted. Where I am at now, I have worked hard to get where I'm at, and I admit I'm not gifted like some of these athletes out here, but I'm at this level because I've worked for it.
Yeah.
Not saying that other people haven't.
Yeah, not the other thing they
but
didn't
I have
work for it.
Worked harder because it just did not come to me. The other point in my mind was, if you have a problem with low intelligence, heavy strength orcs in your setting, change that.
Yeah.
That's all it has to be. Change that. If you don't like barbarian roving hordes of orcs, turn them in, for a real world counterpart, turn them into the Vikings. They were intelligent reavers. They raided. They did it intelligently. That's why they were feared.
But they also were amazing shipbuilders. They were explorers. They had ingenious ways to navigate across massive open oceans that took weeks to cross without sight of land. That the planning and the logistics of getting that done, they had it figured out. And just because you were the Nords, the Vikings, didn't mean that you were a raider. They were also very accomplished farmers.
Yep.
They had massive trade networks. They had complex economics. They had all of that. And they were all the same people. Even if you don't want to do a like the whole bonus to this, negative to that because, that's racist. Okay, cool. Take it away and go point by and do point by for your character creation. There, boom, done.
It's simple as that.
Yeah. Okay, cool. There's just your character was, if someone says like, "Hey, wait, you're playing a smart orc," yeah. Okay, cool, and you move on. It's not that big of a deal.
But the entire battle or fight or whatever you want to label this about representation or cultural identity or making sure the appropriate people don't get misappropriated, even though it's a fantasy race. Just because X and Y species may not be a real world species, the dungeon master or designer forming the setting will draw from comparisons that they know. I've mentioned the Vikings. I've mentioned this because that's what we draw from. That's what writers and creatives do. They draw from what they know. And because it also helps the reader, the target audience, come up with, with their understanding. If it's too alien, if it's too outside of what they can think of, they're going to be confused going into it. So you almost have to draw from real world examples, phraseology, anything like that, just so your target audience can meet you on the same page. The thought process I had coming up with all this, though, because like I had mentioned earlier, I had sat here and really thought about it because I wanted to kind of process everything. People felt like orcs were monstrous and represented in racist stereotypes in their eyes, and they wanted to fix that. Fair point from a concept. I ain't gonna deny that's a fair point. So Wizards of the West Coast, as we mentioned, changed those orcs. For example, the new art in D&D Revised, as we mentioned earlier, changed the orcs to look more human and less monstrous, less savage, less barbaric as their historical counterparts. So let's flip that a bit. Let's pretend these orcs are real world, or a real world culture here. In my opinion, or at least in my thought process over this last week of kind of forming this, there's a section of gamers that brought in this part of social justice I do not feel needed to be brought into the community. There's parts it did, I'm not going to deny, and it has helped. But they were offended by how orcs were historically represented. So they did what another form of what they're arguing against. They did exactly what they're arguing against, though, which includes major cultural sanitation.
Mm-hmm.
They erased the way they looked. They erased their inherent historical look because it did not fit the approved modern audience's sensitive needs. It's not what colonials or is that not exactly what colonial or crusaders did back in the day when they conquered another thing and they rewrote the history?
Yeah, they came in and said, I don't like your history. I'm getting rid of that. You're going to do this now. That's exactly what's...
Now, I'm not saying if you don't like orcs a certain way, then too bad.
Yeah.
You have to keep them that way.
It's make-believe. You can be whatever you want.
It's your game, it's your rules,
Yeah.
Whatever makes you happy. But at the same time, don't claim for the sake of being inclusive or trying to be more sensitive to one group, you're alienating another section of the gaming community, because there's a lot of older gamers, especially ones that were around in the original OG days, that imagine orcs a certain way or are okay with that. And for you to tell them that they're wrong for doing that is wrong in itself. And I'm not saying that there's any right or wrong answer to this by any means, but to be honest, I don't have a better answer to this conundrum because it is a trickery slope, and I am by no means a social justice major.
Yeah,
but
I don't have the perfect answer.
At the same time, I don't want to be a social justice major whatsoever. There's no right way to break the wheel in this situation. But I do know that if this vocal minority does not want to appear hypocritical in their changing, then don't be welcoming of one newer group of players while ostracizing the older group of players, because then you're not being inclusive whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
You're just being inclusive to the point to where as long as they meet your views.
It's like the people that were gluing themselves to the sidewalk. I forget what city. I just saw this recently. But by going one way or the other, just stop. Just stop. It's not needed. I mean, there are legitimate problems in today's day and age that our minds and our emotions and our words can go to fight and to fix. This is not one of them. This is make-believe. This is fantasy. This is pen and paper and imagination and unicorns and rainbows and all that. This is fake. Go fight the real problems.
I'm sorry if you're going to sit here and tell me that my real-life friends who are practically family to me, and then we get together every couple of weeks to play make-believe, and because of the way you disagree with the way we run our game, if you're going to tell me that I run that wrong in my personal home game, then you can pound sand.
Yeah, exactly.
It's none of your business anyways, other than I do share my recaps on here.
But that's also the thing. This is one of the good things about being in social media and being in a capitalist or democratic, however you want to word, look at our country. Go and find those people that believe like you do and go have fun. Because back what you said originally about D&D and just fantasy being a space for escapism, God, yes. I like coming here and sitting down with you guys and playing my half-elf turned tiefling paladin and getting curb stomped by 30-foot tall golems and going through these dungeons and pissing off Odin to where the door that has his face blows me a raspberry.
Basically.
Yeah. All that fun stuff. That's fun. When I come in and I sit at this table and I'm rolling this dice and everything. It is the cheapest form of therapy you will ever find.
That and talking on here with you,
Yeah,
too.
and that's pretty much doing this. Yeah, there's a goal, there's a point to it, but it's like I tell Nate, I'm here till the wheels for this podcast. I'm here till the wheels fall off, because first and foremost, I'm hanging out with my friends, and we're being productive. The primary one is hanging with my friends, and that will never change.
I'm sure we'll eventually get monetized and all that.
Well,
but even if we don't end up making a lifestyle out of this and it's just a hobby podcast, I'm more than happy just it being a hobby podcast. But I think overall we're all pretty much wrapped up because we're just repeating ourselves on the subject.
We are our impotent rage has been spent.
Unless you have any final thoughts, Chase, about it.
I've said it throughout the episode, right? Do whatever you want to do, right? As long as the people at your table are comfortable, your party is fine, that's fine. Do it. Like we just talked about, making a two-handed weapon finesse. Do it. Like, I don't understand. What's stopping you?
Yeah, literally nothing.
Right. And if you think that you're being prevented from doing any race that you want in any way that you want because D&D or Warhammer or Pathfinder or whatever The Witcher says that this is the way this specific monster operates, then you're shoehorning yourself.
Yeah,
exactly. How many TV shows have you watched with a werewolf where they're immune to silver? Uh-oh.
Right.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Vampires that could chill out in the sun and stuff like that, right? It's all make believe. Like, just do what you want, have a good time, guys. Like, I don't know.
Chase, you just triggered me. Oh, you just triggered me.
Why?
The vampires that go out in the sun and
sparkle.
But do what you want.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
If you want to run a module exactly as the modules run with only specific things allowed, then do it. Like, I don't understand what people are being upset about.
Yeah, it's not that hard of a concept.
We add stuff into the worlds, we cut stuff out into the worlds all the time. I don't know of a single person I've ever talked to that has run D&D by the book, top to bottom. I don't even know if that would be the crunchiest, most boring game I've ever sat in. Right.
But on that note, if you agree or disagree with us, leave a comment down below. Definitely leave us a like because it helps our algorithm boost. And if you really like any of our sponsors, check out the links down below, the affiliate links. That will help fund us, hopefully, starting here soon. And then we just have a bunch of lovely small creators that kind of support our podcast and understand where we're coming from here. And if you really want to support our podcast and go to the next level, go to Patreon. Check us out. Become a free member if you want, or become a paid member. There's plenty of benefits that are coming, especially once we start rolling with a couple more members. But with that, I think we'll roll out, fold up the DM screen, and call it good for this episode. Hey, tabletop gamers. Thank you for watching this episode of the Hermit's Homebrew. We come out with new episodes every Wednesday. Remember to like, subscribe, and share with your friends as we continue to level up and grow.